Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today our section will be on the Jacobean and Caroline ages in English literature. I have already discussed about the Elizabethan literature, its themes, its writers, and I'll be providing the link of Elizabethan literature video that I have uploaded in the description box. You can go and check it there. So now we'll be learning about the Jacobean age and Caroline age that came after the Elizabethan age. So today we'll explore these fascinating literary periods to understand their historical context, their historical writers, some of the themes, and how they shaped the future literary movements. So after Elizabethan age comes the Jacobean period. So the Jacobean period spans from 1603 to 1625, and the Jacobean age was during the reign of King James I. So this period kind of followed the Elizabethan age, as I have already said, but it had a distinct shift in its tone than the Elizabethan age. So social and religious tensions were rising in this period, and England was adjusting to a new monarch. And literature, in case of literature took on a darker themes. Writers often explore the complexities of human nature, power, corruption, and the consequences of the ambition. Now we are going to know about some of the literary developments that happened in the Jacobean age. So, drama remained a central genre, with many playwrights delving into some darker and more tragic themes as compared to the Elizabethan age. And in this period, in the Jacobean age, one of the important thing that I'll be telling you now, that in this Jacobean age, metaphysical poetry emerged, which was known for its intellectual depth and philosophical exploration, which often blends the theme of love and religion. So, as we'll further learn about the Jacobean age writer, we'll notice that their writings were incorporated with the intellectual depth and some philosophical exploration, which blends the themes of love and religion. And there was also a rise in tragic comedy, which was a genre that mixed the elements of both tragedy and comedy, and it helps to reflect the unpredictable nature of life. So these are the major literary developments that happened in the Jacobean age. So now we are going to discuss about some of the major literary figures of the Jacobean period. So first is William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was a major writer about whom we have already discussed in the Elizabethan period. But William Shakespeare also continued to write in the Jacobean age. So William Shakespeare was still prominent, who contributed some of his darkest tragedies such as Hamlet, Othello, Macbeth in the Jacobean age. So, and these plays explore the themes of ambition, betrayal, and some of the darker side of human nature, as we can see on the based on the themes of Jacobean period. Next comes Ben Jonson. So Ben Jonson became most prominently known for his satirical works, his satirical comedies, just like Volpono, Every Man in His Humor, The Alchemist, The Bartholomew Fair, and he was also known for his lyric and epigrammatic poetry. And he is also regarded as the second most important English dramatist after William Shakespeare during the reign of James I. Next, we are going to know about John Donne, who was a leading metaphysical poet, and he wrote the complex introspective poetry that explored some divine and erotic love with a great intellectual depth. So, after him, we will be knowing about Thomas Middleton. So Thomas Middleton wrote some of the darker comedies like O Man, Beware, O Man, exposing the consequences of some moral corruption. So Thomas Middleton focuses on the darker comedies. And after that, we'll be learning about John Webster. So John Webster was the master of tragic plays. He contributed with plays like The Duchess of Malfi, and which portrays some tragedy in a world that was filled with political deceit and revenge. I'll be making some detailed analysis of the works of some major writers in the upcoming videos of mine. But as of now, you need to understand what Jacobean age is, what Caroline age is, and some of the themes and some of the works that are based on these themes for the basic analysis. Now we'll be learning about some of the themes that is presented in the Jacobean literature, which was hugely seen in any of the works of the Jacobean age literature. So, first theme was corruption and moral decay. So, characters in Jacobean works often grapple with moral corruption, which exposes the darker side of the society. As you all will read about the works of the Jacobean age literature, you'll notice that these themes were prominent in the works of the writer who wrote during the Jacobean age. And the second one was about the power and ambition. Ambitious character often faces some tragic consequences, which we can see especially in the works of Shakespeare's latter tragedies. Next one was about human suffering and the pessimism. So the period's literature is marked by a sense of existential doubt, which focuses on betrayal, revenge, and the tragic elements of life. So we can see the works of the Jacobean age literature based on these themes. So after Jacobean period came the Caroline age. So the Caroline age spans from 1625 to 1649 during King Charles' reign. And this era saw the increasing political tension between the monarchy and the parliament, which eventually led to the English Civil War. So, Caroline literature reflects the values of courtly love, pastoral beauty, and aristocratic ideals, but these themes often mask deeper social and the political struggles. Some of the key literary developments that happened in the Caroline age was the development of Cavalier poetry. Just like we discussed about the metaphysical poetry which developed in the Jacobean age, and just like that in Caroline age, Cavalier poetry also rose to prominence. So Cavalier poetry celebrates the themes of loyalty, honor, and the pleasures of life. And this Cavalier poetry was a reaction to the rising tension which was surrounded them. And metaphysical poetry, which was started in the Jacobean period, also continued to develop with poets like George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, and these poets' work added emotional complexity to the intellectual themes. And literature in this era started to reflect the growing religious and political divisions, especially as the tension continued to grow towards the civil conflict. So these are some of the key literary developments we need to know about the Caroline age. Now we are going to learn about some of the major literary figures of the Caroline age. So first was John Milton, who was the famous writer who wrote Paradise Lost. But they have wrote so many works, but I'll only be telling you about the work they wrote in the Caroline age. So John Milton started his career with works like Lycidas, which foreshadows the intense religious themes that would define his latter works. Next was Robert Herrick. So Robert Herrick was a Cavalier poet who wrote Hesperides, which captures the themes of Carpe Diem. Carpe Diem means seize the day, with an emphasis on the joys of life. So Robert Herrick, who was a Cavalier poet, he wrote works which captures the themes or based on the joys of life and the pleasures of life. Next was one Richard Lovelace. He was also a Cavalier poet and he wrote about the loyalty and love which was often in service of King Charles I. And next one was George Herbert. So George Herbert was also a religious poet known for his famous work, The Temple. So The Temple was a collection of poems that explores the deep and spiritual devotion. So George Herbert was also a Cavalier poet. Next comes the Andrew Marvell. So Andrew Marvell wrote on the themes of love, nature, and political satires. He also contributed to some political satire that bridges the metaphysical poetry and the Cavalier poetry or poet styles. So these are some of the major and key writers or poets we must know about those who wrote in the Caroline age. So now we are going to learn about some of the themes that was presented in the Caroline literature. So courtly love and pastoral beauty was the major theme that is presented in any of the Caroline ages works. So the Cavalier poets who celebrated the ideals of love and the pastoral often used some refined and lyrical styles to craft their. Next, we are going to find law and honor in many poets' work. So many poets who remained loyal to King Charles I expresses their ideals of honor even as the political climate grew tense, and they didn't define their work to them. They remained loyal to King Charles I and expresses their honor through their works. Next one was about the religious devotion. So they particularly evident. This religious devotion was particularly evident in the works of George Herbert and John Milton. So poets like Herbert and Milton wrote on deeply based on the spiritual themes, which expresses faith and doubt between the social upheaval that was happening at that period. So these are the key themes that we'll be finding in the Caroline literature, in the writers or poets of the Caroline age works. As we learned both about the Jacobean period and the Caroline period, and we also discussed about the works and the themes that was presented in both the periods. So here I am providing you a comparison of Jacobean age and Caroline literature, so you better understand about both of them, and it will help you in the further in your understanding of the works of the writers based both on the Jacobean period and the Caroline literature. So the Jacobean age were focused on the dark and introspective themes and moral complexity. But as compared to the Jacobean literature writers, the Caroline age saw this shift towards more idealized expression of love, honor, and loyalty. Jacobean literature has a more pessimistic tone, while Caroline poetry, especially among the Cavalier poets, embraced the beauty and the aristocratic ideals even in the uncertain times which surrounded them. So, this is about all the Jacobean age and the Caroline literature. So this is a short overview that how these periods works influence the latter periods. So the themes and styles from both the Jacobean and Caroline age influence the Restoration and the Enlightenment literature. So metaphysical and Cavalier poetry, which set a foundation for the emotional and intellectual depth, can be seen in the latter work or latter English poetry. The exploration of human nature, society, politics in these periods laid a groundwork for the future literary developments. So both the Jacobean and Caroline age made some significant contribution to the English literature, from the dark tragedies to complex metaphysical poetry of the Jacobean period to the lyrical honor-bound poetry of the Caroline era. This period shaped the depth and the diversity of the English literature, and they provided a lasting foundation for examining the human experience, inspiring the future generation of writers to write. So as we wrap up this video, I hope this exploration of the Jacobean and Caroline age has provided some greater insight into the richness and complexity of both these literary periods. Thank you all for joining me in this journey through the history and literature of the ages. And I encourage you all to explore these writers and the work further which and each one holds layers of meaning and insight that will definitely continue to resonate with you today. So until next time, keep reading, keep questioning, and keep discovering the power of literature. Thank you all. If you all like the video, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends so that they will also gain some greater insight into the works and into the period of Jacobean Age and Caroline Age.